And here we go. Welcome, everyone, to the very first edition of Scarbo Knows with me, your host, Kevin Skarbinski, a.k.a. Scarbo, to my friends and my foes alike. I'm glad you're here with us on Christmas Day. If you are a basketball fan, there is no bigger day on the calendar than Selection Sunday. And that's where we are. We have so much to discuss. I have in my hands the NCAA tournament bracket. We will dive into it seriously with a number of experts who follow the SEC. And there has never been a better time to be an SEC basketball journalist, writer, broadcaster, podcaster, or fan than right now. 14, that's right, I said 14 of the 16 SEC schools got invitations to play in the NCAA tournament. Well, actually, Florida didn't get an invitation. They earned their way in. They got the automatic bid as the SEC tournament champion. We shouldn't skip past that. That is a huge accomplishment this season. Of all seasons, they took down Tennessee today in Nashville to earn the championship. Auburn, of course, won the regular season championship, and both Auburn and Florida got number one seeds in the NCAA tournament. But 12 other SEC schools will be playing in March Madness this week. So let's go ahead and jump into the conversation. And by the way, as I said, this is the first edition of Scarbo Knows. We will be on weekly and perhaps more than that, but that's what we're going to start with. And I hope you'll come along for the ride. So first of all, let's say hello to a couple of gentlemen who are SEC experts, clearly from SEC Sidelines, your host, Rob Brown. Rob, how are you doing tonight?
This is awesome. I mean, Kevin, nobody's chronicled it better than you. And 14, it's Christmas on steroids. I love this.
Absolutely. And next, we have Franz Beard. He is the senior columnist for GatorBaitMedia.com. Franz and I, we've been following the SEC for just a few years each, right, Franz?
Couple. There are a lot of people watching this thing whose parents weren't even ideas when we started.
That's right. I like to tell people that my first season as the Auburn beat writer for the Birmingham News, Auburn, led by Chuck Person, went to the Elite Eight and was tied with 3 minutes left to go to the Final Four with Louisville. They didn't get it done. Louisville went on and won the national championship. So we've got a lot of memories, a lot of stories to tell, and we will share them and tell them as we go along. And we're also pleased to be joined by Lauren Meadows, another columnist from GatorBaitMedia.com, follows the Gators as well as anyone. Lauren, thank you for being with us.
Yeah, great to be here. Like you said, Christmas Day, it rejuvenates you, man. You get away from football and the conference season and all that can be a grind. But once the tournament starts, man, it's basically madness, and I can't wait. I mean, I'm 12 o'clock Thursday. I'll be chomping at the bit, ready to go.
Well, madness is a good word because there are some people, I imagine, that are mad right now. And some of them might be Florida fans because the Gators, despite winning the SEC championship, despite becoming already the trendy pick to win the national championship, are not the number one overall seed. They're actually the number 4 overall seed behind Auburn, Duke, Houston. So let's jump in there. First of all, Rob, I want to get your impression of Auburn, and all three of you guys jump in on this, of Auburn being the number 1 overall seed, even though the Tigers finished at 1 and 3.
Well, you've chronicled it really well, but the NCAA said that they would not take into account the last 10 games. So there's a lot of momentum. Florida's won, obviously, 9 of their last 10. But overall, 16 quad 1 wins, 5 quad 1 losses. You can't argue with that resume. So Auburn overall number 1. Definitely think the Gators should have been the 2nd seed. And again, saying that because we see the product night in and night out. So there's just Jay Billis. They're putting out their stuff. But they have a right to what they want to say. And Duke Vitale is going to say what he says. But that's what makes this fun. But I I think being the number 1 overall seed only guarantees you've got a bigger target on your back. Now you got to prove that you're worth it, but they should be ready.
Okay, Lauren, Franz, did the Gators get hosed?
I'm gonna let Franz have it. Go ahead, Franz.
Absolutely. What if they had any common sense, they would do this. For one thing, you got the number 1 and the number 4. So if all the number 1s get there, you'd have an all SEC final, semifinal. That makes no sense at all. They could have easily flopped Houston, for example, over to the West and let Florida go to the Midwest. And that way you break it up. So you still may wind up with an all SEC championship, but you wouldn't wind up with 2 SEC teams on one side of the bracket and 2 non-SEC teams on the other. That makes no sense at all. And plus, let's face it, right now Florida's the best team in the country, and I'll go to my grave with that one. They're in a team in the country. If Florida comes in focused and ready to play, they're in a team in the country that Florida won't beat and probably won't beat soundly. They played better teams. The 2 teams they played in the semifinals and the finals of the SEC are probably the 2 best teams they're going to play.
And how about if you look at the records of the top 4 teams in the SEC against each other? Auburn, Alabama, Tennessee, Florida. Florida's 5-1 against that group. And 4 of those wins were not in Gainesville, which makes it even more impressive. Lauren, do you think it's a disadvantage for Florida? Now they've got to travel. If they get to the regional, of course, they're going to be playing out west in San Francisco, or a place Todd Golden knows well.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think it's a disadvantage. They start out in Raleigh this week, and then they move and would have to fly across the country to San Francisco. Time change, a lot of things go with, I mean, those of us that have even traveled for business and other things, I mean, even going to Vegas for a trip, it's different. The time change is different. I'm sure they'll adjust the schedule, allow the guys to try to get their bodies used to it, but it's a definite disadvantage. I think seeing a conference opponent possibly in the second round, I mean, it just didn't make sense. I understand that, you look at the locations. I think the committee thought that Auburn and Alabama, Auburn playing the regional in Atlanta would be a great draw for the area, get a lot of eyeballs on Auburn, the success they've had with getting kids from that area and things like that. But I think to say, well, we're not going to take the last 10 games of the season into account and give credit to, a schedule where, Auburn made a lot of waves early in the season out in Hawaii and things like that. But like you said, if you look at Florida versus the top half of the conference, the record that they had going on the road to get those wins and really the dominant way that they performed in the tournament, if everybody's saying that they're the best team, the most complete team, then why aren't they the number 1 overall seed? I understand the rankings and things like that and where things have been and 17 quad 1 wins that Auburn had, but there's got to be something to playing your best ball when it counts the most, and that's what Florida's been doing. So I think it's definitely a disadvantage. Now, if there's a team equipped to handle that with the level of shooters they have, and, I heard somebody call them the Noah's Ark of basketball. They got 2 of everything, two big men, 2 power forwards, 2 centers, 2 point guards. Then they're equipped to do that. And like Fran said, you stand them up in front of them and they just keep knocking them down. So, obviously the Chase Center is a shooter's house, so to speak. So, that's the one good thing is the sightlines must be pretty good in the Chase Center. And I'll say this, the one advantage the Gators have too, with that being in the Chase Center, I believe, is a lot of those arenas are made and configured to not being conducive to shooting, because some of them are, for football, or they adjust to different things, where you got an arena that was made for basketball. So as far as the sight lines and things like that, that should be pretty good for the Gators. So with those shooters, it's a give and take. But the only thing I would say is, after playing in Raleigh and then having to travel out west, first time out west for a couple of those young men, could be difficult. But if there's one team that's equipped to do it, it'd be the Florida Gators, just because the way they could switch from offense to defense and grind things out if they need to.
I will say this, and hey, before I do, let's welcome in Buddy Martin, who trumps all of us in experience and stories and things he's seen, some of which he will share, some of which he might not. Buddy, thank you very much for being with us. Of course, he's the host of the Buddy Martin Show.
Well, thank
Buddy,
you.
how
thank
are
you?
you?
I'm doing good, Kevin. And I trumped you in years as well, quite a bit. So when you get the years on, I agree with most of what everybody said. Lauren, you're right about Noah's Ark, but I think it's a fleet. I think they got 5 guards and 5 bigs. I mean, they got so much talent on this team. I'm a little bit kind of, I don't want to say miffed, that I wrote writing a column about it tomorrow. Kevin, you know this, we were on a couple of shows together, and all the conversation was about Auburn and Alabama. And I said, whoa, hold on 1 second here. It's not the redoing of the Iron Bowl here. There's a team called the Florida Gators. People are just flatly overlooking. And I blame that on the pollsters early on. They just didn't give any credit. They had to work for every bit of credit. And I'm not a homer here. As I said in my column, I've been criticized for being too tough on Florida teams and too easy on Florida teams, whatever. I don't really care. I think Ray Charles could have seen his team was going to be great way back when. They just looked so terrific. You can go through all the litany of things people have said, their length, their speed, their work ethic, their height, their shooting. I mean, they just got everything, and they do have a fleet of arcs. As a matter of fact, I love watching them play. And I want to say, Kevin, you predicted in Twitter, more brackets will have Florida winning the NCAA than Auburn or Alabama. And I say, like Lauren said, if they were the best team, why weren't they the number 1 seed?
Well, I think I can answer that because we had 2 members of the selection committee, Greg Byrne, the Alabama athletic director, and Martin Newton, who is the Samford athletic director. They spoke to us at the Birmingham Tip-Off Club a few weeks ago, and I will give them credit. They said the entire season matters. What happens in November and December matters. And I think the fact that Florida's non-conference strength of schedule was in the 200s, I think that hurt them in terms of competition for the number 1 overall seed. And some of that was not their fault. You play teams like North Carolina, you expect them to be a lot better than they are. And I think a lot of people were surprised to see North Carolina on the bracket in a play-in game. And the only reason they got there is because UAB came up short in the American Athletic Conference championship game against Memphis. UAB would have gotten that bid, and North Carolina would have been out. But I think those overall metrics, I think that non-conference strength of schedule is one thing that worked against Florida in getting the 1 overall bid. And let me say this, guys. The reason the number 1 overall bid matters is that's the only team that is guaranteed to go where it wants to go. You know, the committee asks everyone, they ask all of the potential 1 seeds to give their preference on a site, but only 1 team is guaranteed to get their preference. And obviously, Florida, if it had a choice, would want to play in Atlanta in the regional. So would Auburn. And if Auburn gets there, there are going to be an awful lot of members of the jungle there, Rob, as you know. Yeah. But so that's the value, the real value of the number 1 overall seed. And let me say this, guys, also, I'm going to puff out my chest a little bit for the basketball state of Alabama. This is the 2nd time in 3 years that a team from the state has been the number 1 overall seed. 2 years ago, it was Alabama. This year, it's Auburn. That's pretty special stuff. Wouldn't you say so, Rob Brown?
No, I mean, it absolutely is. And for 8 straight years, you've had you've had 8 straight years now. Either Auburn or Alabama has won the regular season SEC championship or the conference tournament title. So that's a powerful statement. And you saw when Duke and North Carolina played the weekend of March 8th, the last weekend, ESPN Game Day was in North Carolina. And the fact that UNC stands for, in this tournament, you have no chance. That's what it stands for. And they got that because of their name. You can't give someone a bid based on what they've done historically, but that is how this stuff happens. But I think for as far as what Andy Kennedy has done at UAB, at Troy, they've got a bid top to bottom. At one time, I think you had 7 or 8 of the 10 Division I basketball schools in Alabama had won 20 games or more this season. And you chronicling that is a big damn deal. And look at Florida. Look at the relationship with Todd Golden and Bruce Pearl. It's a very small circle that these champions emanate from.
Hey guys, how about this bracket in Florida's region? You've got, first of all, Kansas and Arkansas playing in the first round. Bill Self, of course, we know what he's done in his career. We know what John Calipari's done in his career.
And they were assistants for Larry Brown at Kansas.
Excellent reference there, friends. And though they're playing each other, and then the other half of that quartet, St. John's with Rick Pitino, who I swear is a vampire. I think he's 438 years old. Maybe the best coach ever. Yeah. And now it's Todd Golden's turn, maybe, to show that he is one of those elite coaches if he can get through that region and get to the Final Four. All right, guys, what are the odds? It could work out this way. The way the committee, following their bracketing principles, laid out the 1 and 2 seeds from the SEC, you could have an all SEC Final Four. As you guys pointed out, you could have Auburn and Florida in one semifinal. You could have Alabama and Tennessee as 2 seeds in the other. What are the chances we see that, Franz?
Probably better than anybody wants to talk about, because I'm not sold on Duke. I'm just not sold on Duke at all. You know, this tells you how strong the ACC is, and I'm saying that without Cooper Flagg, Duke wins the ACC without their best player, and they win the ACC. The league is pathetically weak. I don't ever remember a time that the ACC has ever been this weak. Not even the year they called Black Sunday, which I think was 77, or 78, when all the ACC teams got eliminated on one Sunday. That was terrible. I remember that well. But I think it's better than you think. Tennessee can turn every game into a rock fight. Alabama can outrun anybody. And Alabama's going to get in there with Duke. And I got to tell you, I like Alabama with Duke. If Grant Nelson is healthy enough to play, Alabama can stretch the defense well enough, and they got good enough slashers that they can beat Duke. I'm not convinced that Duke is that good, just not. Houston, Auburn, and Alabama beat Houston. So how good can they be, really? I mean, and Kelvin Sampson, who never met a situation he couldn't cheat in. Yeah, I mean, what he's put every team he's ever been in, with the exception of Houston, on probation. He got that. He inherited that from his dad. Ned was the coach at Red Springs back when I was in North Carolina. So anyway, the SEC's get that strong, and we shouldn't count out Texas A&M. We shouldn't count out Missouri. We shouldn't count out Ole Miss. Ole Miss is a team that, if they've got shooters and if they get hot, they can beat you. Texas A&M can just bludgeon you to death. So the SEC's got some teams. Missouri can play any style you want to, and if Mark Mitchell's healthy, they're going to be, they're in the same bracket with Florida. That could be a really tough one.
Hey guys, since depth is so important this time of year, we're going to add another superstar to our roster here. We're going to welcome in Philip Marshall, longtime journalist in the state of Alabama with Auburn Undercover. Philip has probably seen more basketball games. Philip and Buddy probably have seen more basketball games or forgotten more basketball games than we've seen. Philip, how are you doing this evening?
I'm good. That's that wonderful introduction. I'm honored to be with such an illustrious group.
Well, Philip, here's what I want to know, because I want to know what Auburn fans are thinking. Obviously, they're excited to get the #1 overall seed, but if you look at the bracket, if it plays out, they could be playing Louisville in the second round in Lexington, Kentucky. Now, before I
Well,
let you answer, I will say someone close to the committee, who I shall not name, called me a little while ago and said, let people know that this was not intentionally done to slight Auburn or to make it more difficult for Auburn, and reminded Auburn fans that 2 years ago, Auburn, as the 9 seed, got to play in Birmingham, and they played 1 seed Houston in the second round for that home state, home crowd advantage, which, by the way, Kelvin Sampson was furious when that bracket popped up. What are
right.
Auburn fans thinking about a possible Louisville matchup in Rupp Arena, Philip?
Well, I haven't talked to any fans, but I just got off a Zoom press conference with Bruce, who pointed out what you just said. He said the same thing happened to Houston 2 years ago, and we're going to have to play good teams, and we're not going to focus on that. So, and he said their fans will travel, and that they'll have a good crowd too. So, now what does he really feel? I don't know, but that's what he said, and you're right. The comparison is very valid. Now, honestly, I don't know why the committee does it that way. And it does seem like that. I think most people thought Louisville would be a little bit higher seed than that, and that but when you look at all the 8-9 games, there's not any easy ones for any of the number 1 seeds. The last easy game, even if you're a number 1 seed, the last easy game you're gonna have is gonna be the first game, and well, you hope it's easy. But after that, you're playing teams that are good enough to beat you if you don't play well.
Absolutely. Is there concern, Rob? I know we've talked about it. Auburn finishing 1-3 in its last 4 games, and I think I saw it flash up on ESPN2 while I was watching UAB in the AAC semifinals yesterday that no team has ever lost 3 of its previous 4 games going into the tournament and won the NCAA championship. And of course, the immediate counter is no team has finished with 4 games against teams the caliber of Texas A&M, Alabama, Ole Miss, and of course, Tennessee yesterday. Rob, is there concern that Auburn, because there's a little bit of history here, especially flashing back to 22, when they won the regular season, they set the school record for regular season victories, which they matched this year. Yeah. They didn't play their best in the postseason. Is that any concern, or this new team, new year, that's water under the bridge?
I'm going to reference, Philip, you wrote a column in AU Undercover a couple of days ago, talked about that 86 Auburn team that got whacked by Mississippi State. They were the bottom seed. And I remember I was in school at Auburn, and we watched that game. Friday night, Auburn beat Arizona 71-63, beat number 1 seed St. John with Walter Berry. I can't tell you how many times I've gone back to a Philip Marshall column because he puts things in perspective, and you do too, Kevin, and all these writers do. But I go back to that. Auburn beats UNLV. They were a big underdog out in Houston, and then had Louisville very close in the last couple of minutes and lost 82-75, I think, to Never Nervous Purvis Ellison out of Savannah, Georgia. So that being said, you can't let the past define your future, or you have no future. But you got to know, okay, here's where we are right now. But worry is the absence of faith. I got too much faith in what Bruce Pearl and Auburn have done to this point. So you hate losing, but look who you lost to. Put it in perspective.
All right. So we've got a record 14 SEC teams in the field.
Unbelievable.
Should you fire your coach if in the year when they get 14, if you're South Carolina or LSU and you don't get in the tournament? How big of a failure is that when you're considering that everyone else in the league made it? But let's talk numbers now, guys. The record, obviously, that's a record. The old record was 11. The Big East in 2011 had 11 teams in the field. The record for teams in the Sweet 16 is 6. The ACC did that, I think it was 2019. And, of course, the record in the Final Four is 3 out of 4. The first year of the 64-team tournament in 1985, ironically, in Rupp Arena in Lexington, you had 3 Big East teams, and Villanova shocked the world, beating Georgetown in the final. What is the minimum requirement for the SEC to consider this postseason as a success, or as successful as the regular season which was unlike anything we've ever seen. Lauren, let's start with you. How many Sweet 16 teams, how many Final Four teams does the SEC need to have?
I would say, I wouldn't say that they're going to get 11. I'm going to say 9 of the 14. So 9 of the 14 would be successful, and 2 of the 4 Final Four teams, which I think I agree with France. They're very capable of getting all 4, but I would say 2 of the 4. So I would say 9 of the 14, which would be a little bit over half, 50% of the teams, and then 2 of the 4. I mean, there's some good basketball teams out here in the era of the transfer portal and those things. I mean, the parity is so amazing. And Franz has noted on a number of different times, you got to play your best 6 games of basketball to win it all. So I would say 9 of the 14, and I look for the SEC to get 2 of the 4 to San Antonio.
All right, Franz?
I think I like 8. I think if 8 teams could get into the Sweet 16.
Sweet 16.
And here's the reason why is because that second weekend that second game in your first weekend that's where you see the upsets. You know, you don't see too many. We've had one time a number 1 has lost to a 16, and I think only 3 times a number 15 has beaten a number 2. But you get that 2-7 game, you get that 4-5 game. You know, those games, those are the games where you see the upset, where you see upsets and stuff like that. That 6-11 game is always a beast for somebody, and of course, you know, you get some teams, you get some situations in there that cause some disruption. But I still think 8 can get there. I like Florida. I like Auburn. I like Alabama. I like Tennessee. I like Missouri. I like Ole Miss. I like Texas A&M, and I figure there'll be a straggler somewhere else that'll find its way in there. Maybe even Arkansas.
Rob, what do you got? Sweet 16 teams from the SEC and Final Four teams.
Yeah, I'm going to mirror Franz. I think Arkansas with John Calipari, the way he approaches it, he's not going to have his team too uptight. But I talked to Franz right before we came on the show today, so I'll see that. The one team, Chris Beard's Ole Miss team, them and Texas A&M are very similar. They're going to try to get you out of your comfort zone, and nothing should scare you, but they should keep you up at night. And what turns coaches gray at a young age. The SEC team, I think, that's the most talented, that struggled the most, that's healthy now, is Texas. And I think Philip made a great point. And we all know this, Tahad Pettiford, 0 for 8 yesterday for Auburn. I think Trey Allen for Texas, a couple of games back, went 0 for 10. And he's one of the most talented freshmen in college basketball. But I do think, and again, Kevin, when we talked about this on our show, 2012, last SEC team to win the national championship. Since then, 5 Big East teams, 3 ACC, 2 Big 12s, and the SEC's got with 14 chances. I mean, I go to a lot of Ducks Unlimited and Delta Waterfowl raffles, and I buy a lot of tickets, and it's still hard to win those. But at some point, I'm going to win something. But the SEC's got to bring home the hardware this year because the table's never been set more in their favor.
All right, buddy.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm having a little Wi-Fi difficulty here. Hopefully you hear me. I'm not so much, but not so much the number as how they play, how far they go. I'm going to say that of the 32, they'll probably get let's say 7 teams. Okay, I think Sweet 16 they'll get 4.
Only 4.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, look, guys, can't be too myopic. I know this is the greatest league ever, with 14 teams in it, and they're good teams. I'm just going to take a flyer out on numbers here, but I think 2 of those will get to the Final Four, and then I think an SEC team is going to win it. So to me, it's about the number of it's what you win. That you got 14 in the first group is great, fantastic. I don't think it's a litmus test on the SEC if they don't get but 6 or 7 in the the next round, and if they lead 8, they only get 4. That's fine. But getting 2 in the Final Four and winning the championship, to me, would be a great year.
Philip, is there a number in your mind that the SEC
Well,
has to advance to that second weekend and into the Final Four to consider it a successful tournament?
I'll be very surprised if any of the 4 teams had double byes in the SEC tournament: Auburn, Florida, Tennessee, and Alabama. I'll be very surprised if any of them don't get there. So that's 4, and I think Texas A&M, Arkansas, Ole Miss. I would say 6. If I was going to pick a number to get to the Sweet 16, I would say 6 and possibly more, because I'm telling you, the SEC tournament, the first 2 days were the most enjoyable first 2 days I think I've ever seen in the SEC tournament. Really good players, good teams.
Yeah.
I mean, you had NCAA tournament teams playing on Wednesday. And that's never happened before. And there's just I don't think there is a team out of those 14 that can't get there. I don't see anybody as I just look at it and say, well, they got no chance to win 2 games. But I'm just guessing. I'd say 6, but maybe more.
All right.
Can I just say shout out to
Sure.
my friend?
Go, buddy.
Philip. My gosh, I haven't talked to Philip since he was on my show 100 years ago. And long-time friend, great journalist, great writer, good Auburn man. It's great to see you, Philip.
Thank you. Good to see you, buddy.
His dad is absolutely, when you start talking about the sports writing legends, Philip has joined his dad, but his dad, Benny was, I grew up in an era when, going to the hub at Florida to get all the newspapers to read John Crittenden and Tom McEwen and Buddy Martin and people like that. But we'd go down to the library to pick up the Birmingham papers to read Benny Marshall and people like that. That we had some real legends in this league, didn't we?
Absolutely. Let me tell you guys a quick story about the golden age of newspapers and what you used to be able to do, all of which you are familiar with. 2004, Alabama and UAB are in the NCAA tournament. Alabama's in Seattle. They're playing Thursday, Saturday on that first weekend. UAB's in Columbus, Ohio. They're playing Friday, Sunday. So I go, and I'm, a columnist, so I can choose where I want to go. So I go with Alabama, and Antoine Petway, who's now the coach at Kennesaw State, longtime assistant at Alabama after his playing days, he hits a game winner in the first round. And then we watch UAB on Friday night win a game that was like Florida-Alabama games. It was 111 to 110 or something like that. UAB wins. Then on Saturday, second round now, in Seattle, Alabama beats number 1 seed Stanford. So I write my column, get on a red eye, fly overnight to Chicago, then jump from there to Columbus, Ohio, where I see UAB beat number 1 overall seed Kentucky in the second round in one of the most amazing upsets in NCAA tournament history. Also, one of the best quotes, by the way. UAB's point guard that year was Squeaky Johnson, and their shooting guard was Mo Finley, and Mo hit the game-winning shot to beat Kentucky. And in the locker room afterwards, Squeaky said, "Kentucky ain't used to losing to guys named Squeaky and Mo." But you think about a newspaper paying for and allowing me to be in Seattle on Thursday and Friday, and then Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, and then Saturday night flying the red eye to Columbus or to Chicago, hopping from there to Columbus to cover another second round game. And both teams won. They were on the cover of Sports Illustrated the next week. Might have been the greatest NCAA tournament weekend in state history until Auburn got to the Final Four, and then Alabama followed suit. So those were the good old days, guys, when newspapers would let you do things like that and would pay for it. Sadly, those days are behind us. Go, Philip.
Alabama one year played. This is when I was at the Montgomery Advertiser. They played in their regional. Their first 2 rounds were in Long Beach, California, and I don't remember what Alabama seed was, but they weren't supposed to have a chance to beat Arizona in the second game, but they beat the dog out of them. And so now they were going to the Sweet 16 in Oakland. And I was there, and mine and your late good friend Charles Hollis was there, a few other people. Well, four of us decided. So this, you speaking about what they'll pay for. They said, don't come home. No reason to come all. Don't get no reason to come all the way home and then fly back out there again. So we spent most of that week in Long Beach, and then when we were going up to Oakland, you could do one of three things. You could fly for like $70, or you could drive up the interstate, and it wasn't a bad drive. But we decided that since we were here, we were going to drive up Highway 1.
Big sir.
You didn't let Charles Hollis drive, did you?
to Oakland. It is the longest day I have ever spent in my life. And it was all these curvy roads. And our friend Hollis didn't want to take the cruise control off. We were like, roar, 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 all the way up there. That was they played Loyola Marymount, and the same year that the kid died, Hank Gathers.
Hank Gathers, 1990. Yeah. You know, Wimp Sanderson still kicks himself. He slowed the game down. Loyola was scoring well over 100 points a game, and he decided to slow it down. And they had a chance to win. They lost by what, a bucket?
Robert Ory missed the layup. I don't remember if it would have given them the lead or tied it, but right at the end of the game. Yeah, they kept it in the 60s.
Wimp still kicks himself about that decision. He said, I should have just played. I should have just run with them. I don't know.
Hey guys, after my senior year in high school, I got to go out to San Francisco. It was the summer of love. And I went over to Berkeley, and they had all these guys in tie-dye shirts demonstrating. In 2000, I made a trip out to San Francisco again and went to Berkeley. And I swear, this is the same guys out there demonstrating. Their tie-dyed shirts were all faded and everything like this. And if the Gators get to San Francisco, I got to tell you, I'm going to rent a car. I'm going to Berkeley and find out how many of those guys are still demonstrating something on the street corner. Because
be better off going to some of the great restaurants.
Yeah, they're demonstrating being in the ACC. That's what they're doing now.
Well, these guys are the same age. They were the same age I was in 1969. They're the same age I am now. So some of them still are probably alive and still demonstrating something.
Great food in San Francisco.
Where have we gotten? Yes. We got teams on the West Coast that are in the Atlantic Coast. That just really
Cal and Stanford are playing in the ACC tournament. What's wrong with this picture?
Right.
Yeah.
And that's why.
Don't start, Philip. You get me geographical dyslexia when you start doing that. I can't figure out where Rutgers is and what conference Oregon's in. And
guys, I've spent a lot of time the last couple of weeks jousting with Duke fans on Twitter, who are offended, of course, if you suggest that Johni Broome should be National Player of the Year, as he was by the Sporting News. Kudos to Mike DeCourcy and the folks at the Sporting News for recognizing what Johni Broome accomplished this year for Auburn. By the way, guys, fun fact, Cooper Flagg, as great a season as he had, did not lead the ACC in a single statistical category. Johni Broome led the SEC in 5. And Johni Broome was in the top 5 in 3 other categories, including, which blows my mind, assist-to-turnover ratio as a low-post scorer. Meanwhile, Cooper Flagg was in the top 5 in the ACC in only 3 categories. So Johni Broome was playing in the toughest SEC ever. Cooper Flagg playing in maybe the weakest ACC ever. So just some of the reasons why I think Johni Broome deserves every Player of the Year award there is to come. Is there a guy is from Florida, for example, or from Auburn, Alabama, Tennessee, who's a guy that has to step up for that team to make a deep run? And obviously, Johni Broome, you expect him he's going to give you 20 and 10 plus every night. But who, Rob, pick a team from the SEC who you think has to step up for that team to really make a run at the Final Four?
You're on mute, Rob.
Walter Clayton Jr. for Florida definitely is. He is I mean, he played with Patino. There's a chance he can get to play, him again. That definitely has to happen. But Florida's different than any other team in the SEC. They got 5 big guys, 25 big fouls, but those guys aren't just big guys. They can run up and down the court. For Auburn, and I'll make it a combination. It's so important. Denver, Pettiford, it's Denver Jones and Tahad Pettiford. You can't go 0 for 8 like you did yesterday. And look, that's going to happen. The grind takes its toll on freshmen. And for Texas to do anything, they got to have Trey Allen, but he's got to have a supporting cast.
Trey Johnson.
Trey Johnson,
freshman, yeah.
Trey Johnson. But Coach John Brady's on our show usually on Wednesdays. And our intern, Oakley McFerrin, a few weeks ago said, I've got Mark Sears in my top 5. And Coach Brady said, I think he's a hell of a player, but I want to see him do more away from the basketball. And if you look, Mark Sears needs to play more defense. You got to make things happen when you don't have the ball. So, yeah, you've got to have – there's no more mulligans now. So I mentioned those players offhand. And then in terms of Tennessee, Chaz Lanier, he's got to produce. Florida's sneaky, scary, good. They have so much depth. Tennessee also, they're going to try to slow it down. And Texas A&M, just their style of play is hard to deal with. So there'll be a problem for anybody if they're clicking, but they ain't clicking right now.
Yeah. You think Auburn didn't notice that they might play Texas A&M in the Sweet 16 in that bracket?
Bruce just got some more gray hair.
Yeah, the struggles they've had with Buzz Williams and those guys the last few years.
The thing about Texas A&M to me is they're. I think Buzz Williams, he's one of my favorite coaches.
Me too.
But I'm just not sure you can get in that field and win 6 straight games on offensive rebounds. And they caught Auburn at the very best possible time. Short rest after they just clinched the SEC championship and made them pay for sure. But I think that what Auburn needs, when they are that most effective, is when people double team Broome, because he is such a willing passer and such a good passer. And he throws it out and people hit 3-pointers. Well, last night they didn't hit those 3-pointers. And it wasn't just Pettiford. Denver Jones hit one early. He didn't hit another one. Denver Jones is a really, really important player for Auburn because he's such a great defensive player. And but the one thing I would say about Auburn, and this didn't just start to me in the last couple of weeks. Sometimes Miles Kelly, like at Kentucky, it's like he can't miss. I mean, he just throws it up there and it goes in. But then sometimes he misses open shots. I think they need to be a little more consistent on 3-point shots. That's such a big part of the game now when they've got open shots.
Lauren, is there a guy? I'm sorry, Philip. Go ahead and finish your thought.
No, the guy would be Miles Kelly. He's the best shooter. But Denver Jones came to Auburn as a scorer, not to play point guard. And he's played point guard a lot this year. But that's the first time I've seen Pettiford have a game like he had last night. Usually in the biggest games is when he's at his best. I mean, I think he's going to be an All-American player if he stays around long enough to be one.
Yeah, that was shocking because he's been, like you said, he has stepped up against the toughest opponents. So to see him go over like that was a real shocker.
Yeah, and Janai Broome has actually improved as a free throw shooter too. And again, until last night, it can be so random. I mean, Tennessee made 92% of their free throws last night. That's not something they've done normally.
Yeah. They don't do that night in and night out. No,
that's the randomness of the game of basketball. And because that's not something anybody can control. If you're Auburn, you can't stop them from making free throws. And you can't, if you're Tennessee, you can't make Janai Broome miss free throws. But he did. But I thought that Auburn fans you spoke about earlier they're wringing their hands a little too much. I mean, I thought the Alabama game in Auburn was one of the best basketball games I've ever watched, and Auburn certainly had their chances to win it, and they didn't. And Alabama made a great shot to win it. But as I told people, I said, if he hadn't made that shot, or if Janai Broom had made that shot at the end of regulation, Auburn would still be the same team today that it is. And so I don't, the 3 out of 4 thing is interesting, but heck, I could also say that Auburn can't win it, and Alabama can't win it, and Tennessee can't win it because they've never won it.
It's funny the way you put that, Philip, but every tournament is different. Every weekend is different. Lauren and Franz, I'm interested, if you look at Florida's bracket, and again, the trendy pick to win the national championship is Florida. If you're I don't know, if you're wagering lunch or something, you're not going to win a lot of money picking Florida, because everybody's going to pick Florida that doesn't pick Duke, I would guess, or at least the majority. But is there somebody in Florida's potential bracket? Is it? I know my son who goes to UF. He's been telling me all day, I don't want to see UConn. I don't want to see UConn. I don't want to see UConn. And there's UConn in that second round. Of course, I saw somebody on CBS pick Oklahoma to beat UConn. I'm not sure I would go with that. But is there a team, Lauren, that scares you? That scares you in Florida's bracket?
Yeah, it's UConn. And just because I'm a big believer in, you don't know what you don't know. And what they've got sitting in front of them is an opportunity to repeat, be a 3-time champion. Franz could check me on, was the last time UCLA. I mean, you talk about somebody where they won more than 2 in a row.
UCLA is the only team that's ever done it.
So there you go. So, I mean, with that, which that's what I thought. So with that said, I mean, they're a team that, is very confident, coached really well. The scout is going to be unbelievable. They're going to know what's happening. Now, what Florida has is, in these moments, they have a guy like Elijah Martin, who has been a member of a Final Four team, has been through this ride. And if Florida can get past UConn, then I think he will be more important as a steady hand, as opposed to, I mean, he's going to play well. He's going to play. I mean, he's a great athlete, big, strong, long arms. That's going to be there. But his leadership through these rounds where things can get a little tight, being somebody that none of the other guys have been there before, can lean on as someone who has been there. I've done this. This is what we did. This is how we acted. This is the approach we need to take. Yeah. I think it's going to be very important for that team. And then that's where, UConn, could be one. Obviously Kansas with their roster, down the road, obviously probably underachieved according to Kansas standard. And if you look at that roster top to bottom, but those would be the two for me. But I think a guy like Elijah Martin for Florida is going to be key. I mean, I think I've said all year, he's the glue. He's the one that has really come, and, you had all those pieces, but he's been able to really take on the challenge of basically guarding 1 through 4 at times, being able to switch on anything. And I think Elijah Martin is going to be huge there. You guys talked about Chaz Lanier. I agree totally. For Tennessee to really take that next step and really make a run at this thing, Chaz Lanier has to be, at the center of the Tennessee attack, and has got to shoot. I mean, even in the game against Florida, there were some opportunities to make some open shots that could have kept Tennessee in the game, and he just didn't knock them down. And then for Auburn, and I'll throw this out there, and I'm a big Bruce Pearl guy, but Chad Baker-Mazara, you're 25 years old. Act like it.
Okay.
Everybody knows what I'm talking about. No. So 25
wait,
years old.
Lauren defended him the other night when I was saying that.
No, I didn't say that. I said
yes,
that
you did.
I did defend him. Yeah. I said that it was I said Bruce Pearl was probably shocked at the way he behaved, but I also said he whines a lot. Stop whining and play basketball.
Here's my take. I want to hear from you guys also. I think since he got that flagrant 2 against Alabama, which I thought was justified, that he has not been the same player. I think he's been a little tentative. I think he hasn't played with the same joy, because that guy's always smiling. Even in adversity, he seems like he has a smile on his face. but I don't think he was the same in Nashville. And I think it's really important for him to get that back, to get that spirit, that energy, that he brings so many things to that team when he's playing basketball. Rob, Philip, do you think that? Do you think he lost? Has he reined himself in? Has he put a governor on himself since that flagrant 2?
I don't think so. And he didn't play great in Nashville. You're right, but I think talking to him for the first time since the Alabama game after the Ole Miss game, he said that the people are trying to get under his skin, trying to goad him into doing something. He said I heard an opposing coach, he wouldn't say who it was, saying hit him. And but I will say this, and it doesn't make it okay, but the same guy he hit in the back of the head elbowed him right in the gut a few minutes before that, and nothing was called.
All right, let's not be shy. Chris Youngblood from Alabama,
and
yes. Who plays with an edge himself.
Right.
Let's
I'm
be
not
honest.
saying that made it okay, because it's stupid if for no other reason, because it cost your team.
Yeah.
But I do believe in some cases. I mean, he got called for a technical foul for staring at the Florida bench. I've never heard of that. And I just don't. I think that you're the official, you're the adult. You don't need to be saying I'm watching that guy. Just call what you see.
Yeah.
And I'm not. I've long said this. I think there needs to be exact rules on what's a technical foul, not what irritates one official. It doesn't irritate another official. That bothers me, and I don't know why. If I'm running by a coach and he's cussing and yelling and screaming, I don't know why. If I'm an official, he can't come out there and bother me. So why do I care?
It's not an exact parallel, but in college football, everybody says, what is taunting? In college basketball, it is what is targeting, I should say. In basketball, the equivalent, the similar is what is taunting.
Right.
Is it doing the Crimson Crane as Grant Nelson did after that dunk in the IBOB on the last Saturday of the regular season? Is it, it's depends on the official. And if it's Pat Adams, we're going to get 12 reviews of that and everything else that happens. All right, guys.
Zone.
Let's get down to it, because everybody has to do this. I think it's a law. I don't know if it's a state law or a federal thing, but I think it's a law that everybody who knows anything about college basketball has to pick a Final Four.
Oh man!
Right after. I know. I see you cringing, buddy.
Nah, I'm not ready to do that.
But everybody does it. Look, we're not going to hold you to it. There are no penalties for being incorrect. And let me just add, 1997, Franz, you mentioned 1997. If you guys remember, South Carolina had a great team that year. They won the SEC regular season under Eddie Fogler, led by a great backcourt with B.J. Mackey. And me, in my infinite wisdom, picked South Carolina to win the national championship. And they were a 2 seed, and in their first game went out and lost to number 15, Coppin State. So we all have memories of brackets that went wrong, spectacularly so, very quickly. So I know you guys haven't had time to study this. I haven't had time to study this. But just give me a gut instinct.
Let me say something.
For a Final Four. Go ahead.
Let me give you this. We are partnering up with a group called Ernie's. They're now issuing a challenge to all the people in Auburn and in Florida. What they do is they want you to go onto their website. I think, Brandon, I've got it right, Ernie's.com. And they're a group somewhere up north, and they're challenging people to jump into their brackets. They are our official brackets now on our shows. And because the winner of this thing gets $5,000, but besides that, they're issuing challenges to schools. Whoever gets the championship gets to keep the Ernie's trophy at the bar of their choice for a year. Like in Florida, it would be probably Steve Spurrier's Gridiron Grill. We want to issue a challenge to Auburn fans to go on. It doesn't cost you a thing. Go on and make your picks online. I'm not even looked at the brackets yet. I just know where Florida is, basically. And go on to the brackets. Give me a minute to look at the brackets first to make sure I got the right teams in. But go to Ernie's.com and sign up. And I'm going to do my brackets tonight, matter of fact. Next time you come back to me, I'll be more prepared. And France, you're kind of one of the official spokesmen for this. Chime in there.
All right. Well, I can tell you this: picking brackets, buddy, is nobody ever gets it right. I mean, I can pick sometimes the one that wins it all. It's the other games that lead up to that game that I get wrong all the time. I mean, it's like 2007. I could have told you right off the bat that Florida was the best team, was going to win it all, period. And there was no question that they were. And there have been a couple teams like that. Kentucky 2012. You know, I mean, what they have 13 on the roster and 41 of them made the NBA. You know, and by the way, let me throw something in real quick because y'all were talking about officials. I was in Savannah when young Jimmy Valvano is coaching Bucknell, and they're playing Armstrong State University in a game at the Savannah Civic Center. And he asks the Zebra, he says, can I get a technical foul for something I think? And the official said, no, you can't. He said, well, I think you suck. And get a technical foul for it. So, all right. I like.
All right, well, let's do this, friends. Let's do this before you give us. If you're not comfortable, let's do either give me a national champion, gut pick, without analyzing the bracket. Give me a Final Four if you're comfortable, or give me. And this is really more interesting to me. Do you guys have a system? Do you have bracketing principles of your own? We know the committee has bracketing principles. How soon teams can meet from the same conference. Of course, the SEC blew that up this year with 14 in the field. But are there things that, like, if you see a team, you immediately eliminate that team, or you will never pick a certain coach because he blew up your bracket 10 or 20 years ago? So let's start with you, Franz.
I'll never pick Georgia, period.
Is there a reason for that?
Yeah, they're Georgia. I mean, I would pick Al Qaeda against them, you know.
Oh, hello.
Simply because they're Georgia. Okay, so we can throw Georgia out immediately. They're not going to win the national championship. And as much as I like Mike White personally, I hope he gets his butt kicked in the first round because it's Georgia. I like Florida to win it. There are certain teams that have no chance. You know, the MEAC team, the SWAC team, they're not going to get there.
Hey, now don't you talk bad about those Alabama State Hornets.
Now I will tell you.
Tony Madlock, former Auburn assistant under Tony Barbee, is the head coach at Alabama State, and they're going dancing for the first time.
Good job.
2011, and Tony's a good guy.
If there's a Cinderella to be had in this, look out for McNeese State and Will Wade, who is coaching for his next job and is going to get one because everything he did to put LSU on probation and get himself fired is now perfectly legal. He was just ahead of his time. That's all. It's kind of like Charlie Pell. You know, Charlie was just 40 years ahead of his time. That's all there is to it.
But wait a minute, Franz. But it hasn't Will Wade, or at least the reports are, he's already talked to NC State. Does he have his mind on other business rather than coaching his team in this tournament?
Trust me, he's got Texas, he's got North Carolina State looking at him, he's got Iowa looking at him. He's got at least 4 teams that I know of that are looking for him. And by the way, Texas, I don't know if they're going to fire Rodney Terry or not, but if they can make a deal with Billy Donovan, Rodney Terry will be gone. And that's a fact.
I think half the teams in America would take that deal if they could get Billy Donovan.
Well, that's out there. But I like Florida. I don't, Duke's going to make it, but they're going to get wiped out because they got an easy bracket. They really do. I like Tennessee coming out of the Midwest. I think Alabama can beat Duke, but I don't know that the Zebras will let them do it. And I mean that. And anybody who thinks that the Zebras don't influence things, go to something called Ref Metrics and take a look at things. For example, Joe Lindsay called the game today, which is why I think both teams shot a combined 809 free throws. And a 2-hour game lasted what, till 6 o'clock almost. Depending on the officials you get, that is going to determine who gets out of certain brackets and everything like that. I like that. I think Alabama, if they get the right officiating, can beat Duke. I don't think there's anybody in Auburn's bracket that can beat them, quite frankly. I mean, talk about dialing up an easy bracket. Auburn dialed up an easy one compared to some of the other ones. You look at what Florida's got to go through down there. Florida will get there, but Florida's got the toughest road to go. Auburn has the easiest. Duke has the second easiest. And then Florida and Houston have the toughest ways to get there.
All right, Lauren, give it to me.
Auburn, Florida, Alabama beats Duke. I think Grant Nelson is Cooper Flag kryptonite. And we get who did I have?
Tennessee or Houston?
I have Clemson.
Clemson
coming out of the coming out of the Midwest. So
of course Clemson, they got to the Elite Eight last year.
And then
losing to Will Wade.
And then Florida wins it all. Florida takes down Auburn. Again, it's just a bad matchup for Auburn. I think Florida either beats Clemson or Alabama in the final.
All right, Rob. Rob, you're on mute.
Michigan State coming out of Auburn's bracket, and that's just how I feel right now. Probably going to feel different in 24 hours, but then I'm going to take Florida, and take Alabama. I'm going to take Houston. That's my final four, and I've got Florida playing Houston for the championship, and Florida wins it all. I think they're playing better than anybody. And I want to go back to what Philip said about Chad Baker-Mazara. Doug Dean pointed out brilliantly on our show last week, don't fall for the narrative. Bench Chad Baker-Mazara, get rid of him. He's a bad guy. It's very similar to 2010, Auburn running for the national championship. Nick Fairley's a bad guy. I'm sorry, Aaron Murray. When you're quarterback and you play in the SEC, you're going to get hit by some full-grown men, as Coach Dye would say. Get over yourself. So Chad Baker-Mazara, I think what's happened, be yourself, Chad. Just be yourself. And I think he's scared right now of making a mistake. A guy always parks my car at Jordan-Hare Stadium, always says, scared man, they never want to fight. Just be Chad, but put the team first. That's all I can say, because he's really, really good. But Philip,
Rob,
you may not agree.
Rob, I'm going to hit you. I'm going to hit you with a flagrant one for bringing football into the conversation on Selection Sunday.
Yeah,
I know but these two schools right here.
Let me say one thing, and I know this because I looked back at years ago at the play-by-play of every game of that season. Yeah. Nick Fairley was called for two personal fouls in the entire 2010 season. But Chad, I don't think Chad's scared. I don't think he's scared at all. I think I think, and Bruce touched on this after the game. I think, and he said something about it today too. He said we felt like we had an advantage inside in both of the last two games, but sometimes it seems like they've gotten so focused on throwing it into to Broome, and then when you have a game like last night when he throws it out, nobody's making shots, and but I don't believe Chad Baker-Mazara is. That's just not who he is. Now you talk about a guy his teammates love him. Chris Moore said he's the best human being he's ever known. Yeah. I mean, he is really a good guy, but he is a explosive guy in more ways than one on the basketball court. And but I don't believe he's scared. I really don't.
I hope.
Is it my turn for the Final Four yet?
Yes. It's your
Well,
turn.
I'm a little. I don't know about picking the Final Four because I think this. I think that Florida right now is the most complete team in the country, in that they've got gigantic guys inside who are also athletic. They've got great guards. They don't. There's not there. If you want to go out there and run. But when they beat Auburn in Auburn, Clayton went crazy in the first half. But they ran him off 3-point line in the second half, and he only scored 3 points. But they dunked it all night long, and that's the thing. Whatever you do against them, even if you're successful doing it, they've got an answer to do something else. And Todd Golden, and I've known Todd since he was an assistant early on with Bruce Pearl, and he is a wicked smart guy. He is an extraordinarily smart guy, and he even tried to teach Bruce Pearl all about analytics when he was at Auburn. I don't know if he was successful or not, but he tried. And but I think Florida. I would definitely, if I had to pick a national champion today, it would be Florida. The rest of the Final Four, I think Auburn will get there. I think they're going to. Just the way they played all season long, I think Auburn will get there. I'm not sure about Alabama because 110 points to Missouri, 104 points against Florida, 90 plus points. I think 5 other times. I just don't know that they can score with anybody now, but they can't. I just don't know that you can outscore everybody. And but they're certainly talented enough to do it. Duke. I think Cooper Flagg is probably the most entertaining and explosive player in the country. And Johni Broome is different. But as you talked about earlier, the level of competition is the same. I think Duke will have a real shot if he's 100% healthy, which I question whether he will be. I heard, not from anybody, I don't know anybody at Duke, but I heard it was a high ankle sprain, and if it is, then that's trouble.
Yep,
that's trouble. And even still, it's taken Broome weeks and weeks to get over a sprained ankle and get back to 100%. But if I had to pick a Final Four, I would pick Auburn. I would pick Houston, Florida, Auburn, Houston, Florida, and I guess Duke. If he's healthy. If he's not, I'm not even sure who else is in the bracket. I know Alabama is, but
Alabama's the 2. Wisconsin's the 3. Arizona's the 4 in that bracket.
I sure don't see Wisconsin, Arizona getting there. I'll say Alabama.
All right, buddy.
Auburn, Alabama.
Yeah, let me jump in.
This season for Auburn and Alabama to both get to the Final Four in the same season they played when they were 1 and 2 in the polls.
Philip, don't get ahead of me. Philip, don't get ahead of me. I'm going to get the last word here, and I'm going to wrap it up. And I think you know where I'm going. Go ahead, buddy.
All right. So let me say, first of all, Will Wade's been coaching for his job for 30 years, friends. Nothing new about that. He's a good coach. I like Philip's picks. Actually, I finally settled on 4 teams, and those are the 4. I finally figured in my mind the brackets: Auburn, Florida, Duke, Houston, probably, and I think Florida will win it all. And here's what I want to tell you about Florida: is that their depth is phenomenal, and this is when it starts showing up right now. These teams are tired, beaten up. Look at Alabama. Look at Auburn today, and they've got guys who haven't played even. Sam Alexis coming off the bench. You haven't even seen him. The first time he comes off the bench and knocks down 3, you say, where'd that guy come from? They got him everywhere. They're 10, 11, 12 deep, and this depth's going to show up now. And I've been saying all along, Florida has not played their best basketball. And I've also been saying that the 3 blind mice on the committee haven't been paying attention. And you even said to me, Kevin, when I said something on the show, one of the shows you were on, says Buddy's right about Florida being overlooked. I'm not trying to play the homer card. It's just, I mean, I can see what's in front of me, and I'd like to say what I see. Apparently, they don't see, and that is this team is loaded. They're playing their best basketball and may yet play better basketball. So I like Florida's chances a lot, but then again, what's the old Valvano line? Survive in advance. You only got to lose one game and you're out. So they have gone to sleep a couple of times, namely Georgia, got behind by 26 and went ahead and then came back and lost it. So unless they have a brain fart and and mess up, this team is really good. And as I said today, I told somebody, this is not only the best basketball team in Florida, and I think they are better than the 04s because they're deeper, whatever. Although friends will argue with me about that. And I think they're one of the best sports teams I've ever seen in Gainesville, and they are fun to watch, and they've had adversity to overcome, which steel, iron sharpens iron, right? The situation with Golden, when it happened, that looked like that could be the death sentence. And then, of course, they've had issues with the player, whatever you get. But it's a good Florida chances. I'm picking them to win it all.
All right. So let's wrap this up. On November 4th, 2024, I wrote a column for the Birmingham Lead, and I didn't predict it. I suggested that this could be the greatest season in the history of basketball in the state of Alabama, and it could end in San Antonio with Auburn and Alabama playing in the national championship game. Now, there have been some twists and turns, but as Philip, you pointed out, we've already had the first 1-versus-2 game, not just in the Iron Bowl of basketball history, but in SEC history between number 1 Auburn and number 2 Alabama. We have Auburn winning, of course, the regular season, Florida winning the tournament. So I'm going to predict, even though Tennessee has never been to the Final Four, I'm going to predict 4 SEC teams in the Final Four: Florida, Auburn, Alabama, and Tennessee, in a different order than we saw on Final Four Saturday in Nashville. And I'm going to predict that the ultimate IBOB, the Iron Bowl of basketball, is going to take place in San Antonio, home of the Alamo, Alabama versus Auburn in the national championship game. And Auburn takes its first national championship in basketball.
There'll be some fans exploding if that happens, Kevin.
If it happens, you heard it here first. If it doesn't happen,
you
don't know me. You never heard me.
I know nothing, Sergeant Schultz.
If it doesn't happen, we could just claim you stayed on the 10th floor at the Emily Morgan, and left with your eyes like that. Everybody else who stays at that hotel.
Hey guys, I can't thank you enough. My first venture into hosting a podcast. I'm excited going forward. Scarbo Knows will continue. We're going to start out weekly. Hope everyone will join us. For Lauren Meadows from Gatorbait Media, Franz Beard from Gatorbait Media, Buddy Martin from Gatorbait Media, Philip Marshall from Auburn Undercover, Rob Brown from SEC Sidelines. Guys, thank you so much for being here on Selection Sunday. I hope everyone's picks come true, unless they conflict with mine. And I hope you guys have a great evening. And we'll see you again on the road
Ernie, get your
to the
brackets,
Final Four.
Get your brackets at Ernie's and come on, Florida versus Auburn. Let's go.
We'll see how it turns out. Thanks, guys. Have a great night.
Thank you guys. Enjoyed it.
Thank you, Brendan Norton, our executive. See this without him. Good night, everybody.
Good night.